Today, we are actually starting with the bow. This is pretty exciting. So here's how this is gonna work. I'm gonna show you every step for holding your violin bow properly. But after that, if you stick around, I'm also gonna give you a hack that I use for my students. I hate to call it a hack because really it's just a helpful tool. I started using it for all of my in-person beginner students because instead of me constantly fixing and adjusting their bow hold, this has helped pretty much cut out almost entirely the need for me to correct them on their bow. So especially if you don't have access to a good in-person teacher, I really highly recommend using one of these. But I also want you to know the principles of how to hold your bow regardless. You want to make sure before you actually start playing with your bow that you have put rosin on your bow. So if you have any questions about how to rosin your bow, I have a related video on how to do that here. You want to make sure that your bow is just tight enough that you can fit your pinky finger through the middle of the bow between the hair and the stick. It doesn't need to be any tighter than that. To tighten your bow, find the little screw at the end of your bow and you're going to tighten it clockwise to make it tighter and counterclockwise to make it looser. So let's start from the beginning. You're gonna hold your bow with your left hand just so that you're holding it out in front of you. The proper way to hold your bow is to have your thumb right here in this space, see where the wood is exposed between the grip, which is this grippy black part here, and the frog. So you have a little space in here where you stick your thumb, and your thumb is always bent, okay? Don't get into the beginner bad habit of bending your thumb or locking it backwards like this. Your thumb is gonna come in here bent inward, and the very tip of your thumb touches the wood right in that little space. But as a beginner, if you're finding that you're having a hard time with your bow hold, holding your thumb there, it's okay to put your thumb down here at the bottom of the silver part. Now, as you start playing more advanced music, this is not a professional bow hold, but it is a very common beginner bow hold, and it's where I start most of my very young students, as well as older students who might struggle with some arthritis in their fingers or are just having a hard time with that bow hold. For some people, it really helps to just get started with a little bit easier bow hold, putting your thumb down here. Okay, in either case, your middle finger is now going to come down directly across from your thumb. See how I have this very rounded C shape with my hand. So I'm not holding the bow this way or anything like that. Everything is very round. So I'm putting my thumb in here or down here, and my middle finger is going down directly across from it and almost all the way down. Next, you'll put your ring finger right next to your middle finger. These two stick together. They are going to be touching each other. Next, you can rest your first finger lightly on top of the bow like this with a little bit of space here between your first and second fingers. Now you want to make sure that you're not hooking your first finger underneath the bow. That will affect your sound. But you also want to make sure that you don't have it straight up like this. You're letting it curve over the bow. Lastly, you're going to put your pinky finger on top of the bow, and the very tip of your pinky finger sits right on top like that, with some space between your pinky finger and your third finger. Lastly, I want you to make sure that your knuckles are not pointing straight up to the sky. Practice twisting your hand back and forth. So first, your knuckles are going to point way toward the point. This is the point of the bow. They're going to point way to your left, and then you're going to turn them and point them way to the right. Way to the left, way to the right. Okay, now almost all the way to the left, but not quite as far, and freeze. Okay, so this is a proper bow hold. My knuckles are now pointing toward the point, not completely collapsed in, but still they're not pointing straight up, and they're definitely not pointing this way. They're mostly pointing toward the point of the bow. You want to make sure that you're not gripping the bow, but you're just holding it as loosely and as gently as you possibly can to maintain lots of flexibility in your wrist and your fingers. If you haven't already, you're welcome to download my perfect position checklist. And I wanted to show you that there's a page here that's all about bow position. And it walks you through with pictures, step by step by step, where to put every finger on the bow, along with that exercise that we just practiced for making sure that your knuckles are pointing the right way. So this is something you can put on your music stand or just have near you if you want to have a step-by-step visual guide to where to put all of your fingers on the bow. But let me also show you this special hack that I have started using for my students. Now, if you've heard anything about Suzuki violin, you might be familiar with the idea of a pinky house that helps students remember to put their pinky finger in the pinky house and keep the pinky on the top of the bow. But I've more recently discovered something called a bow buddy that didn't exist when I was a kid, and it's been really helping my students of all ages because it basically shows you exactly where to put your fingers. This might be something that really accelerates your progress. So the way to use it, if you get one of these, is your first finger goes over here on this side. I always say first finger leads the way. Your second and third finger go down here in between the two pieces. I always say they're friends, they stick together. And then your pinky goes into the pinky house, which is this little fish piece on the end. And then you have a choice whether to put your thumb on the bottom for that beginner bow hold, or there's actually a little space in here where you can tuck your thumb in, and that helps you just have an easier time with that more advanced bow hold. I still have some students who I have to remind to make sure not to have their knuckles pointing straight up, even with the bow buddy. Make sure that you're following the curvature of this little froggy guy here, and your knuckles are pointing toward the point. Lastly, let's put it together with the violin and play just some open strings. When you put your bow up to your violin, I want you to challenge yourself to play from the frog all the way to the point. It's really easy as a beginner to get stuck just using a little tiny bit of bow because it's easier. But you will have more fun in the long run, and you will look so much more professional if you train yourself to get into the habit of using lots of bow. And the reason why it's difficult is because it's actually really hard with the angles of the bow to play with a straight bow. Almost every beginner wants to play like this. See how my bow immediately is crooked, and listen to the sound. I lose all of this sound. And so we have this tendency as beginners to start playing like this, but you end up losing all of your sound as you do that. So instead, what you want to try to do is make sure that your bow stays exactly straight, parallel to your bridge. I cannot emphasize enough how much I recommend practicing in front of a mirror as you do this, because what I very frequently see with beginner violinists is that they try to keep it parallel with the bridge, and then they start going like this with their heads to try to see that straight bow. And what that does is it's a bad habit, and it creates tension in your neck. So instead, try practicing in front of a mirror. So right now I'm using the camera like my mirror, and I'm just going to make sure that my bow stays parallel with my bridge. And I'm putting my bow right in the center here between the edge of the fingerboard and the bridge. Here we go. You will probably have the sensation that in order to keep your bow straight, you're going to feel like you're almost pulling your hand in a little bit like this to keep it straight. And as you get closer to the point, in order to keep your bow straight without letting your violin move at all, your violin stays right where it is. In order to keep your bow straight, you're going to feel like you're pushing your hand almost forward in front of you. Okay, so at the frog, it's going to feel like everything comes in. I'm exaggerating a little bit. And at the point, you're going to feel like you're pushing your hand out in front of you in order to keep it straight. One more quick tip for you when you're playing with your bow. If you find that you have a very scratchy, screechy sound, it's probably because you're putting too much pressure on the bow. Conversely, if you have a really wispy sound, it's probably because your bow is just floating across the string and you need to use a little bit more, I hate to say pressure, but think of it maybe like weight. You need to use a little bit more weight on your bow. So if the wispy sound is you, I want you to think of your whole arm and your elbow being heavy and getting into the string a little bit more. Okay, did you get a chance to try that? Let me know in the comments how this bow position is going for you. And I'd love to know what things you're still struggling with. So now let's try that A major scale that we plucked in the last video, but now we're going to do it with the bow. Again, I challenge you to start right from the frog, and we're going to play with whole bows from the frog all the way to the point and back. So we're going to start with open A. Now 1 on the A string, 2, 3, open E, now 1 on the E string, 2 on the E string, and now 3. Let's play 3 again. Lift your 3 to play 2, lift your 2 to play 1, lift your 1 to play open. Now place just your 3 on the A string. Now as you do this pivot, I want you to try to pivot very quietly over to the A string and place your 3rd finger down, all the way down on the string, on the tape, before you play with your bow. Place your 2, lift your 3, then play. Place your 1, lift your 2, then play. Lift your 1 and play open A. Okay, stopping and setting your fingers before you play and all these things might seem really tedious when you're just getting started and you just want to play your favorite songs, right? But I really encourage you, please, please, please stick with it, because this is how you're going to play well on the violin. This is the main principle here for playing with clean sound. Instead of having all those extra sounds in between, when you put your bow away in the case after practicing, you'll want to make sure that you loosen the tension on the bow just a little bit. That will help make sure that your hair on the bow lasts longer and doesn't fall out as quickly, so you don't have to pay for a bow rehair as frequently as you would if you constantly kept a lot of tension on that hair. In lesson 8, we are finally putting it all together with the violin and the bow, playing Mary Had a Little Lamb. I've even recorded a piano accompaniment part for you, so you can play along with that piano accompaniment and be the soloist for your very first piece on the violin. See you there.